Baik, Assalamualaikum dan selamat sejahtera kepada semua ahli panel dan juga para hadirin. Sebelum kita memulakan majlis kita pada hari ini, marilah kita bersama-sama membacakan surah Al-Fatihah bagi memberkati majlis kita pada hari ini. Al-Fatihah. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Semoga majlis pada hari Jumaat ini diberkati Allah SWT. Baik, hibahan mesra juga untuk saya ingatkan sebelum kita mulakan majlis supaya semua ahli panel dan juga para hadirin untuk menutup dan memastikanlah mikrofon tidak terbuka supaya tidak mengganggu majlis kita pada hari ini. Baik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera kepada tetamu istimewa dari JPPKK POLISAS, penganjur MPCC SAS Award 2022, semua wakil politeknik dan kolej komuniti, semua panel jemputan dan para hadirin yang dihormati sekalian. Selamat datang juga kepada yang baru menyertai live kita pada hari ini. Tanpa melengahkan masa, dengan ini saya menjemput yang berusaha landscape arkitek Rohaniah Binti Muhammad Nur, Timbalan Pengarah Bahagian Kurikulum, Jabatan Pendidikan Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti, merangkap Timbalan Pengerusi, pengurusan program MPCC SAS Award 22 untuk memberikan sepatah dua kata sebagai ucapan pendahuluan kita pada pagi ini. Terus, majlis mempersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah dapat kita bersama-sama kali ini. Maaf saya sebenarnya tak dapat nak buka saya punya video because my background ni tak dapat yang tu. Jadi saya tak rumah bercuti, tapi alhamdulillah sama-samalah nak meraihkan seminar kita iaitu seminar pengurusan projek Mampan untuk ekonomi komuniti dan persekitaran siri 1. Jadi terima kasih Puan pengacara majlis yang berusaha IR TS Hisham bin Yahya iaitu pengerusi Malaysia JPM Awards, yang berusaha TS Dr. Nur Saidatul Akmal bin Majlis, Setiausaha Kehormat SustNET, yang berusaha Puan Hajah Wan Zuraida binti Wan Yusoff, Timbalan Pengarah Akademik, Politeknik Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah, merangkap pengerusi program MPC SAS Award 22, yang berusaha juga Encik Suhaimi bin Yazid, Timbalan Pengarah Akademik Politeknik Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah, merangkap Timbalan Pengerusi Keuangan MPCC SAS Award 22, yang berusaha Encik Anwar bin Ismail, Pengarah Program MPC SAS Award, panel penceramah, pengarah-pengarah Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti, serta pengurus-pengurus Smart Green yang saya kasihi, dan juga serta seluruh warga JPPKK Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti Malaysia. Alhamdulillah, segala puji bagi Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, selawat dan salam buat junjungan besar Nabi Muhammad SAW. Syukur kehadiran Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala kerana dengan izinnya kita dapat bersama-sama pada hari ini dalam webinar pengurusan projek Mampan untuk ekonomi komuniti dan persekitaran siri 1 sempena program Malaysia Politeknik dan Komuniti Kolej Sustainable Award 22. Okey, walaupun panjang kita baca tajuk, harap tajuk ni dapat memerangsangkan ahli-ahli yang ataupun daripada luar sana yang mendengar apa sebenarnya yang dikatakan sebagai webinar pengurusan projek Mampan. Kita selalu dengar pengurusan projek, tapi ini alhamdulillah satu yang kelainan iaitu pengurusan projek Mampan. Jadi sangat besar untuk ekonomi, komuniti dan persekitaran. Saya harap panel-panel yang ada hari ini dapat memberi kita sedikit sebanyak maklumat yang kita perlukanlah bagaimana kita nak menaikkan agenda Mampan di institusi kita iaitu Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti. Terima kasih juga sebenarnya kami ucapkan kepada Ketua Pengarah kami iaitu TS Zainab binti Ahmad, serta Pengarah Kanan Akademik Encik Muhammad Nur bin Shahuddin dan seluruh pihak pengurusan tertinggi JPPKK atas sokongan dan kerjasama yang telah diberikan selama ini. Tahniah juga dan syabas kepada Jawatankuasa Malaysia Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti Sustainable Award 2022 terutama tuan rumah POLISAS. Saya cuba buka saya punya macam tak sedap pula saya bercakap. Sebab nampak background dia tak berapa nak cantik kan, tapi tak apalah, nanti nampak muka saya kan. Okey, terutama tuan rumah daripada POLISAS dengan kerjasama Sustainable Business Network Association Malaysia SustNET atas penganjuran webinar pada kali ini. Terima kasih juga diucapkan di atas kehadiran semua peserta yang hadir di sesi webinar ini dan kepada jawatankuasa serta semua pihak yang terlibat secara langsung atau tidak langsung dalam pengajuran webinar pada kali ini. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang saya hormati, webinar bertajuk Pengurusan Projek Mampan untuk Ekonomi, Komuniti dan Persekitaran Siri 1 ini merupakan salah satu usaha bahagian kurikulum JPPKK untuk mencapai hasrat yang terkandung dalam Blueprint Smart Dream POLYCC BSGPC 2021 hingga 2026. Di mana blueprint ini kami bangunkan bersama juga dengan wakil-wakil industri, terutamanya saya rasa Dr. Nur Saidatul banyak membantu kami lah bagaimana kami membangunkan blueprint ini. Dan juga secara tidak langsung dia akan dapat menyokong usaha kerajaan untuk merancang dan melaksanakan agenda pembangunan negara yang mampan selaras dengan semangat keluarga Malaysia, aspirasi wawasan kemakmuran bersama 2030 dan agenda pembangunan mampan. BSGPC 2021-2026 dibangunkan dengan visi untuk memperkasa budaya hijau dan melasihkan politeknik dan kolej komuniti, di mana BSGPC ini mengandungi 7 bidang tumpuan yang mempunyai objektif dan pelan tindakan yang tersusun, telah dibangunkan untuk memastikan semua aspek kemampanan dan kelestarian di setiap politeknik dan kolej komuniti dilaksanakan bagi membantu mencapai hasrat negara. Ini dapat memberi peluang kepada institusi untuk memilih inisiatif yang sesuai untuk ditengahkan mengikut kesesuaian kerana setiap institusi mempunyai keupayaan ekologi dan ruang serta kepakaran yang berbeza-beza. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati semua, warga POLYCC semua juga, berapa tahun kebelakang ini kita dapat lihat Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti mengadakan program-program teknologi hijau serta projek kemampanan dan pencapaian tersebut mendapat iktirafan di dalam maupun di luar negara. Antara pencapaian di peringkat antarabangsa adalah dengan menyertai UI Green Metric World University Ranking. Jadi untuk makluman semua, pada tahun 2021 sebanyak 7 buah politeknik telah menyertai UI Green Metric World Ranking universiti dan telah diiktiraf kedudukan isteri mereka di peringkat antarabangsa. Politeknik yang terlibat adalah Politeknik Merlimau, Melaka, Politeknik Mersing, Johor, Politeknik Sultan Idris Shah, Politeknik Kuching, Sarawak, Politeknik Sultan Hajah Ahmad Shah sendiri di tuan rumah kita, dan juga Politeknik Hilai dan Politeknik Banting. Tahniah dan syabas diucapkan kepada mereka dan diharap pada tahun 2020 ini akan lebih banyak penyertaan daripada institusi yang lain. Ini merupakan kebanggaan dan usaha ini perlu teruskan tanpa henti. Bagi menyokong usaha ini, alhamdulillah pada tahun ini MPC SAS Award 2022 yang merupakan tahun ketiga penganjuran yang diadakan pada 7 September 2022, Politeknik Sultan Hajah Ahmad Shah telah berhasrat hati untuk menjadi tuan rumah. Terima kasih Politeknik Sultan Hajah Ahmad Shah. Alhamdulillah. Dan juga kalau kita lihat tujuan penganjuran program MP SAS Award 2020 ini adalah untuk memberi penghargaan khas kepada Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti yang telah berjaya melaksanakan inisiatif amalan mampan dan teknologi hijau sekaligus menyumbang kepada hasrat dan komitmen negara dalam mengurangkan pelepasan karbon dioksida. Jadi anugerah ini juga akan memberi pengiktirafan kepada individu atau kumpulan yang mengetengahkan amalan-amalan mampan di dalam kampus maupun di luar kampus dalam menjalankan aktiviti dan berjaya menghasilkan projek daripada sumber-sumber yang sedia ada, dan insya-Allah kita akan menyaksikan pemenang yang akan menerima pengiktirafan Malaysian Green Project Award oleh Green Project Management JPM Global US pada kali ini. Okey, JPM adalah badan profesional yang mengiktiraf projek-projek mampan di peringkat antarabangsa yang merangkumi sebanyak 145 buah negara. Terima kasih kepada JPM. Okey, seterusnya hadirin sekalian, webinar pada hari ini merupakan siri yang pertama dan insya-Allah akan ada siri yang kedua dijalankan pada 17 Jun ya, Dr. Noh, betul kan? Jadi maklumat semua, sebanyak 7 kategori anugerah akan dipertandingkan dalam MPC SAS Award. Anugerah yang akan dipertandingkan ya pada tahun ini ialah penyimpanan tenaga elektrik, landscape hijau, penyimpanan air, pengurusan perolehan hijau, pengurusan pengangkutan dan penyelidikan hijau. Kesemua kategori anugerah ini adalah merupakan antara 7 bidang tumpuan di dalam BSGPC dan jumlah markah keseluruhan tertinggi akan mendapat anugerah Smart Green POLYCC. Jadi kami mengharapkan bantuan daripada wakil-wakil yang ada di sini, terutama JPM, untuk membantu kami untuk memberikan, maksudnya mendapatkan nilai yang tertinggi kepada mana-mana institusi yang masuk supaya kita dapat anugerah kita tu diiktiraf di peringkat at least orang kata kebangsaan, peringkat antarabangsa dan sebagainya untuk anugerah Smart Green POLYCC pada kali ini. Jadi Tambahan pula anugerah pengurusan projek hijau akan mendapat penyerahan Malaysian Green Project Award oleh Green Project Management Global. Ya. Okey, alhamdulillah. Akhir kata, semoga webinar pengurusan projek Mampan untuk ekonomi komuniti dan persekitaran siri 1 ini akan menjadi pemangkin kepada warga JPPKK, warga Politeknik dan warga Kolej Komuniti dalam mencapai agenda matlamat pembangunan Mampan dan pelan strategik Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti. Semoga program segera ini akan dapat diteruskan lagi di masa hadapan dan berjaya membawa JPPKK ke puncak kegemilangan. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, para hadirin sekalian yang sangat-sangat saya hormati dan sayangi, seterusnya dengan lafaz Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, saya dengan besar hati merasmikan webinar bertajuk Pengurusan Projek Mampan untuk Ekonomi Komuniti dan Persekitaran, Siri 1. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi kepada Anda juga.
Baik, terima kasih kepada Ketua Jabatan Kuasa Pengurusan Projek Mampan dan Penganugerahan Landscape Arkitek Rohaniah Binti Mohd atas persembahan kita saja tadi. Terima kasih banyak. Dan seterusnya, tanpa melengahkan masa, saya juga ingin menjemput yang berusaha, Puan Hajah Wan Zuraida binti Wan Yusoff, Timbalan Pengarah Akademik Politeknik Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah, merangkap pengerusi program MPCC SAS Award 22 untuk memberi sedikit ucapan pada pagi ini. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya mempersilakan.
Terima kasih kepada saudari moderator majlis. Sebelum tu dapat dengar suara saya kan? Okay,
dapat.
Yang berusaha Insinyur Teknologis Hisham bin Yahya, pengurusi Malaysia DPM Awards. Yang berusaha Teknologis Dr. Norsaidatul Akmal binti Mazlan, Setiausaha Kehormat SustNET. Yang berusaha Landscape Arkitek Rohaniah binti Muhammad Nur, Timbalan Pengarah Teknologi Pertanian, Bahagian Kurikulum JPPKK yang juga merangkap Timbalan Pengerusi MPCC Award 22. Yang berusaha Encik Suhami Yajid, Timbalan Pengarah Sokongan Akademik POLISAS. Yang berusaha Encik Anwar bin Ismail, Pengarah Program MPCC SAS Award 22. Pendek-pendek penceramah, pengarah-pengarah Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti, pengurus-pengurus Smart Green POLYCC, serta seluruh warga JPPKK, Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti Malaysia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Alhamdulillah, bersyukur kita kehadrat ilahi kerana dengan izinnya dapat kita bersama-sama pada pagi ini sempena webinar MPCC SAS Award 22 yang bertajuk Pengurusan Projek Mampan untuk Ekonomi, Komuniti dan Persekitaran. Terlebih dahulu, saya bagi pihak warga POLISAS mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Landscape Arkitek Rohaniah binti Muhammad Nur daripada wakil JPPKK yang sudi meluangkan masa bersama-sama menjayakan sesi webinar pada pagi ini. Terima kasih juga diucapkan kepada SustNET atas penganjuran webinar pada pagi ini. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian, sesi webinar ini diadakan sempena Malaysia Politeknik dan Komuniti College Award 2020, MPCC SAS Award 22, anjuran bahagian Kurikulum Jabatan Pendidikan dan Politeknik Kolej Komuniti dengan kerjasama Politeknik Sultan Haji Hajah, POLISAS. Alhamdulillah, pada tahun ini POLISAS telah diberi peluang untuk menjadi tuan rumah bagi penganjuran MPCC SAS Award 22 selepas Politeknik Mersing pada tahun 2020 dan Politeknik Sultan Idris pada tahun 2021. So pada tahun ini POLISAS menjadi tuan rumah bagi MPCC SAS Award 22. InsyaAllah dengan sokongan dan kerjasama semua, diharapkan program ini dapat berjaya dengan jayanya. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dikasihi sekalian, penganjuran MPCC SAS Award ini merupakan satu pengiktirafan bagi memperkasa budaya hijau dan melestarikan Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti selaras dengan objektif pembangunan Blueprint Smart Green POLYCC 2021-2026. Penganjuran ini juga bertujuan untuk mencapai KPI Politeknik dan Kolej Komuniti di bawah strategi peningkatan program POLYCC berimpak tinggi. So bila sebut budaya hijau ni serta hari Jumaat, saya ni cuba pakai baju hijau lah menyahut saranan daripada pengurus Poligreen POLISAS ni, Encik Anwar. Dan tapi itulah kalau kita pakai baju hijau pun tanpa membudayakan kehidupan kita, green dalam kehidupan kita, tak guna juga lah kan. Okey, selain daripada sesi webinar yang diadakan pada hari ini, sesi Jerayawara yang bertajuk Hala 7 Ekosistem Mampan POLYCC yang turut diadakan pada 26 April yang lalu. Selain itu, pelbagai aktiviti akan dilaksanakanlah sepanjang tempoh bulan Mei hingga September 2022 seperti aktiviti kampus hijau, CSR bersama komuniti seperti program membersih pantai dan penanaman pokok bakau dan diikuti dengan pertandingan dan juga anugerah. Dan dijangkakan majlis penutup akan diadakan pada 7 September nanti. Terdapat 9 anugerah utama yang akan dipertandingkan dalam MPCC SAS Award 22 ini, iaitu Anugerah Smart Green POLYCC 2022 iaitu sebagai anugerah utama yang mana ia dinilai daripada 7 anugerah yang lain, iaitu daripada Anugerah Penjimatan Tenaga Elektrik, Anugerah Landscape Hijau, Anugerah Penjimatan Air, Anugerah Pengurusan Sisa, Anugerah Pengurusan Perolehan Hijau, Anugerah Pengurusan Pengangkutan dan juga Anugerah Pendidikan Terbaik. Manakala anugerah pengurusan projek hijau JPM POLYCC 2022 akan dinilai oleh pihak SustNET. Akhir kata, sekali lagi saya mengucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada Landscape Architect Rohaniah Binti Mohd yang merupakan Timbalan Pengarah Teknologi Pertanian Bahagian Kurikulum JPPKK yang sudi bersama-sama kita semua pada pagi ini, dan terima kasih juga kepada panel-panel semua di atas persetujuan untuk berkongsi pengetahuan berkaitan dengan budaya hijau ini. Terima kasih juga diucapkan kepada semua peserta dan juga jawatankuasa pelaksana daripada pihak SustNET dan juga POLISAS yang telah merealisasikan sesi webinar ini. Saya sangat berharap agar program MPCC SAS Award 22 ini mendapat sokongan dan penyertaan yang meluas dari seluruh warga POLYCC. Dengan itu saya sudahi dengan wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam dan terima kasih diucapkan kepada Puan Hajah Zuraida binti Wan Yusoff atas ucapan sebentar tadi. Baiklah, sekarang tibalah masa yang ditunggu-tunggu. Jadi saya akan memperkenalkan sebersikit latar belakanglah panel kita yang pertama ini, iaitu Insinyur Tan Sri Hisham Yahya yang merupakan pengerusi GMP Awards, di mana beliau berkelahikan dalam ijazah dalam kejuruteraan mekanikal dan seterusnya mendapat diploma lanjutan kemahiran Malaysia dalam mekanikal iaitu pengurusan projek UNG, seterusnya menjadi jurutera profesional yang berdaftar serta ahli teknologi profesional yang berdaftar juga, dan seterusnya pengurus projek hijau bertauliah GPMB dan beliau merupakan perunding dan penilai GPM berdaftar GPM RCA. Jadi jumlah pengalaman Insinyur Dr. Tan Sri Hisham ini adalah beliau telah mempunyai pengalaman kerja selama 35 tahun dan antaranya adalah 5 tahun dengan LLM dalam perjalanan kuasa, 10 tahun dalam dengan Shell iaitu penapisan dan juga terminal minyak. Seterusnya 20 tahun dalam menjalankan perniagaan sendiri sebagai kontraktor ONG dalam projek dan menjalani perunding kejuruteraan. Kemudian 10 tahun lagi sebagai penyediaan perkhidmatan pengurangan asbestos dan seterusnya 5 tahun sebagai facilitator dan perunding TVET dan seterusnya 2 tahun sebagai juru audit teknikal dan juga penyiasat kegagalan insiden. Maka tanpa melengahkan lagi masa dan tak sabar untuk kita dengarkan pengongsian daripada Insinyur Tan Sri, maka saya menyerahkan kepada Insinyur Tan Sri Hisham Yahya yang merupakan pengerusi GMP Awards membicarakan tentang pengurusan mampan yang cemerlang. Dengan segala hormatnya, majlis mempersilakan.
Terima kasih saudari pengerusi. Jadi mungkin saya nak buat correction sikit lah. The TS tu basically teknologi profesional, bukan dia Tan Sri. Jadi saya Datuk pun tak ada. Okay, basically IR is basically for professional engineer dan TS basically for professional technologies. Jadi I think before we start, saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada Puan Haniah dan juga Puan Zuraida dengan kata-kata haluan dan juga kepada semua warga POLYCC, dan saya berharap dengan adanya webinar ni kita lebih peka dan juga lebih cenderung ke atas penggunaan teknologi mampan ataupun sustainable development. Okay, jadi let me share my screen. Boleh nampak tak my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, can see.
Yes, can
Okay.
see.
Okay, so nanti bagi saya selalunya saya tak suka nak besarkan disebabkan kalau saya besarkan nanti saya tak nampak muka-muka yang itu. Jadi buat presentation without seeing the faces, jadi kadang-kadang almost like talking alone. Jadi harap kalau tak dapat membaca dengan jelas, just let me know because the font actually is quite big. Jadi I prefer to actually speak over and juga nampak muka-muka semasa presentation. Jadi what I actually going to present today is mainly on sustainability project impact assessment. Jadi I think what's important di sini ialah sementara kita actually cuba memperkenalkan projek-projek with sustainable impact. Okay, we are also looking into what are the consideration that basically we look at in order for you to actually be given some award. Jadi I think this is where I think very important. Seperti mana kalau you want to play the game, kalau katakan firstly you need to actually understand how to score goal dan juga untuk menang ataupun untuk berjaya. Jadi one of the area that we need to actually understand actually how do actually understand the game and then how for us to actually score the goal. Jadi my agenda basically the time given to me is only 20 minutes. Jadi I will touch only on two areas. Okay, one, importance of sustainability in project management, and secondly looking into the tools on project sustainability impact assessment. So these are the area that we want to actually stress in particular. Apakah ciri-ciri yang kita akan tekankan di dalam doing the impact assessment for the sustainable project. So firstly, the question now been asked, why sustainability impact in project management is very important. I think that's very important. People asking, kenapa sekarang dewasa ni there's a lot of focus on sustainability impact in managing a project. Jadi I think a lot of you also fully aware that because of currently we have a lot of the changing climate. Kalau dulu saya ingat masa kecil-kecil dulu, when talking about the climate, we actually basically inter monsoon we are very clear. Talking about around March, April, we have basically hujan di semenanjung di pantai barat, and then towards the end of the year, November, December, basically di pantai timur, and then it's very clear and very predictable. But because of this climate, changing of this climate, and then there's a lot of uncertainty. Jadi sekarang kita nampak seperti hujan sepanjang tahun, hujan tak dapat dipredik ataupun any kemarau dan sebagainya. Jadi this is the one of the reason because of some of the activities that we do are basically is not sustainable. We have basically impact to the climate. So this is where whatever time we left currently, that we need to actually look into how can we actually make changes towards it so that we are not basically damaging the world anymore. Okay. And secondly is water shortages. Kalau kita lihat di Malaysia ni, kita dianugerahkan oleh banyak sungai. I think it's almost 190 sungai. Sungai yang besar lah. Kalau anak sungai tu, I think we have a lot more than 1,000. Tapi we have basically the count is almost 190 sungai, di mana di Semenanjung alone we have about close to 100 sungai. Jadi di sini kita look into in terms of water shortages, we shouldn't have any water shortage. Tapi what's important here when we talking about water shortage is clean water. So that's where I think the biggest impact that we are looking now actually into how to actually solve clean water shortages in Malaysia. And thirdly is on air quality. Air quality can actually be derived in many aspects. Okay, due to the construction activity, due to the activity that we are doing, especially when we are also looking into putting on the aircon, putting on the some of the work that we do. Okay, we are basically contaminating the air. Okay, so that's where that we need to actually look how we want to do the work more sustainable manner in order to actually prevent deterioration of the air quality. Thirdly is a new terrain. Okay, I think there's a lot of news about you heard about this mudslide, banjir lumpur, which is actually happening, And I think these are the area that currently kalau say 30-40 years ago is unheard of, banjir lumpur. Tapi now is very often you see that banjir lumpur ataupun this mud flood is happening in Malaysia, and is happening everywhere, especially on the penggondolan hutan-hutan. And fifthly, actually looking into the industry impact. Okay, what are the industry that actually give impact to the country, especially on the release of contaminants, okay, release of some of the toxic gases, toxic waste, and so on. So these are the things that we need to look into. How can we play a part? Okay, probably some of these warga POLYCC mungkin rasa that it beyond me that we can actually play a part, but actually everybody can actually play a role. Okay, we can actually look into if we cannot actually produce great impact on some of the activities that we do. I think very important for us actually to produce a small item or small activity in a great manner. Okay, so I think it's very important for us to actually look at. And being a project manager, okay, I think most of you, one way or another, you basically will be, when you manage project, you are basically a project leader or project manager. You need to actually look into how can we actually ensure that we tackle sustainability issue. And then we also need to actually ensure that why we are doing it is also to have a better tomorrow for our children, for our next generation, and so on. So we look into the Imagine project. Mainly the vision basically is that we look into the social, environment, and economics. Okay, where most of the time, I mean, in organization, I work for some organization as well. Okay, we normally focus on cost, the economic factor, rather than looking into the social environment. I think there's a big drive currently that we need to actually then start looking into how can we actually then look into the social and environmental impact apart from economics. So why sustainability impact is that important? Okay, mainly we look into when we actually look into some of these project, we need to actually prioritize the sustainability risk, and then we need to actually improve it to ensure that we create project value in order to actually meet the environment, society as well economic strategy. And the next thing also, we need to actually look into the output give our action item. Okay, when we start looking into the impact, we start to measure it, we start to actually pay attention. That's where we actually then have the justification, as well as we have actually the outlook in improvement of it. Because normally what we believe is that what we measured gets attention. So we need to actually measure what basically impact that we are giving, either it's positive impact or negative impact. That's where then we have better attention to it. So next, I will actually move on to the tools. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, is that when we are looking into submitting the sustainable project, I think what's important for us actually to look into what are the criteria that we are looking at. How we actually do assessment of your project, and with that you can actually channel the project approach, channel the project plan, channel the project activity in order to meet the criteria. That's what we are looking, and that's what actually everybody is looking in terms of the global green project management. So some of this thing maybe you have a question, okay, in terms of the awarding body for sustainability framework, okay, who is GPM Global, okay, because the award basically coming from GPM Global of US, okay, and why GPM recognized as awarding body, and what competency are being developed for sustainability. So these are some of the questions that some of you may raise, okay, and in terms of the sustainability award, what are the criteria to apply for this sustainability award? Who qualified for this sustainability award as well, benefit of sustainability award? So these are things which along my presentation, I will actually touch on some of these questions that you may have actually been asking. Firstly, actually, is that in order for us to actually assess this in terms of the sustainability project, we need to actually have a tool. Okay, and one of the tools that we are using basically is called PRISM, Project Integrating Sustainable Method, where they actually have the P5 impact as analysis standard. Okay, of which This P5 impact assessment element, we look into 5 areas. Okay, that's why they call it P5. Okay, one actually look into product. Okay, the technical aspect of the product. We'll actually go through in greater detail shortly. And secondly, look into process, how you actually manage the process of executing the project. Thirdly, what the impact on the people or the social. Fourthly, basically look into the planet or environment impact, and fifthly, look into the prosperity. So these are the 5 elements that we actually look into in managing the or assessing the project, which once you actually understood about the way that we're actually going to actually doing the assess, then you can actually focus on what elements and how is you going to actually showcase your project in order to actually meeting the requirement where we are basically looking at. So basically, this is part of the, I would say that tip soalan, or what is it? Tip jawapan, basically. That basically we are giving you some of the tips that what we are basically assessing you, how we're going to assess you, and how you can actually prepare to showcase your project. Because sometimes you may have a very good project, but if you actually showcase it in a different angle, you may not actually demonstrate, and they will not actually highlight the important part that we would like to see. So in terms of this P5 standard, okay, they are based actually along the United Nations Global Compact 10 principles. Okay, we also look into is also meeting the United Nations Global Reporting Initiative. This is where our P5 reporting also meeting the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance. Okay. And latest that the P5 framework also meeting the SDG 17. And what we're actually looking at, some of the elements or most of the categories that I will actually go through shortly, is that you can align with the 17 SDG. These are basically the tools we use in terms of the GPM Global P5 framework. Okay, we look into the product. Okay, the impact of the product. Mainly, we look into the lifespan of the product and also the service of product. So when you basically identify the project that you have, okay, is your product is a goods, or is it a product basically services? Okay, and then what are basically that you want to actually have in terms of impact on the product? Okay, so that's where you can actually highlight. And secondly, looking into the process, impact, looking into how effective is the project process, and how efficient, as well as how fairness of the project. So these are some of the criteria that you can actually look at in terms of looking into the project processes. And just to actually highlight to you is that some of the elements, for instance, or the categories that we have on product impact as well as project process, and we also look into the sub categories underneath, and you need not basically follow use everything. Okay, you can actually pick and choose some of these that you think the most relevant to you. And thirdly, we look into the people. Okay, in terms of the people, there are basically many categories and subcategories underneath. You can actually run through and see what are the impact that it actually hit your project, and how you can actually mitigate this impact. It can also be positive impact as well as negative impact. So for the positive impact, you may want to enhance it, and for the negative impact, you may want to look into how to eliminate or minimize the impact. And then you can actually align this impact to the SDG. Okay, so basically there's a correlation with some of these subcategories to the SDG 17. Okay, and next we also look into the planet. Okay, again, you basically have the transport, energy, land, air, and water as a consumption, and lastly, actually on prosperity. So these are the P5 elements, okay, that we can actually use, or we are using to actually assess your project, and it can actually be aligned with the United Nations 17 SDG. In terms of objective, why do we actually look into the impact assessment? I think firstly, actually, or importantly, is that for us to promote sustainability impact in project management. We want to actually look into, when you're managing the project, are you basically looking into the sustainability impact? Because and this sustainability impact, normally we look into the 3 pillars of sustainable development: the social, whether how you basically look into the people impact, how do you look into the planet or the environment, environmental impact, and how you look into the prosperity or the economic impact. So some of you probably been doing it, but you may not basically doing it consciously. So what we are looking here is that as we run through, we would like you to actually highlight and profile the impact on social environment, environmental and economic, in order for us to actually see that yes, your project basically meeting the criteria in looking into some of this impact. Okay, whether it's a positive impact for you to actually enhance it, or you need to actually look into how you can eliminate or minimize the impact. And the review the description of the project in line with the P5. So we have basically the P5 framework. Okay, you can basically look into the P5 framework and align your project deliverables or project proposal in line with the P5 standard. And some of your project deliverables or project impact can also be internal as well as external. So these are things that we need to actually look at, and we also would like you to also highlight some of the impact on this internal or external event, as well as look into the potential stability impact on each pillars. You need to also identify some of the possible response, because if you have a negative response, okay, what you are going to do in order to minimize or eliminate it. If there are going to be a positive response, how are you going to actually maximize or enhance the response in order to give a better benefit to the people at large. Okay, and we do a score between 1 to 5. Okay, for each categories. I will actually touch. We have basically have 5 categories that we are look at, and first one we look into whether there's little impact on that category. Okay, whether we have wide ranging or having a good impact. Okay, between 2 to 3, and then if basically you have a very high dramatic and powerful impact, basically you score between 4 to 5. So our scoring system basically from 1 to 5. And the first category that we look into actually is on the project concept. Okay, we look into how you actually incorporate the 3 sustainability pillars, the people, planet, and prosperity, into your project. Whether the design is robust, that actually will last well. Whether your project design can be usable, recyclable, or repurposed. Okay, whether your project actually have a modular design where you can basically interchange, and you basically have variable sizes and so on. So, and also whether it can also be can be transferred to other areas, and so it's transferable. So these are things which we look into your project concept. It can be small, it can be very little or small project. However, what we look into how great or how big the impact to the people, planet, as well as prosperity. Okay. Secondly, we look into the material consumption. Okay, these are the area that we really look into, especially when you execute a project, you have basically your material selection. Okay, and when we look at the material selection, we also look into whether the material used, okay, is it can be reused or recycled, whether it's environmental friendly, whether you use bottle instead of plastic, okay, whether you use some of the biodegradable material or basically non-biodegradable material and so on. Okay, we look into that environmental friendly material. We look at whether it's locally manufactured material, because we want to see that whatever project that we basically is for the benefit of the community at large, within the community, whether the item basically is can be found locally, that actually the preferred, or you need to actually find from a different state or different area, or basically from outside the country. So that's where some of the elements that we actually look at. We also look into your plan to reuse or recycle or repurpose after end of a project. Sometime at the end project, what you're going to do, whether it's going to be repurposed, or you can basically or it has to be disposed. And we also look into minimizing the material consumption. Okay, how you can actually look into to reduce the usage of material, especially when the material is not environmentally friendly, or the material cannot be reused or recycled. So how you actually going to minimize the use of the material. And the other area also we look into the production of the material use is not, whether it's energy intensive or it create harmful byproduct. Okay, so these are the area that we look at when your selection of material. You may need to actually pay attention whether what material being used for a particular project, because you can actually, in any activity, you can actually decide to use plastic, you can use steel, you can use wood, you can use many other products. And these are the things that selection of material are also very critical in terms of the sustainability of the project. Thirdly, we look into the operational aspect, looking into how you actually the project operational being used, okay, whether it's meeting the principle of social, environmental as economic. We look into the how you minimize pollution or hazard. Okay, sometimes most of the project you may actually have some byproduct or some wastage, and whether that wastage you're going to actually pollute or going to be create hazardous to the environment. Okay, we look into, and if there is actually there's negative impact, and how you minimize it. Okay, and then we look into how you actually implement it with cost-effective way, financially, and operate on efficiently. Second is on the energy usage. Okay, how you basically minimize the energy in terms of your technology. Okay, thirdly, recycling. Okay, segregation of system, how you actually manage the waste management, how you actually look into the byproduct and so on. And next, actually look into green cleaning practices. Okay, how you basically housekeep the area, whether you actually creating any tripping hazard, any unhealthy situation to the environment, especially in terms of your waste management. And next is on the decoration, whether you are basically using indigenous plant, okay, are chosen, or whether you are basically looking into having some of these non-biodegradable material as your decoration. Marketing collateral, whether you look into minimizing your printed handout, using electronic info sharing, and so on. Okay, so some of the items that you can actually look into on minimizing paper. Okay, basically it's a paperless marketing tool and so on. So these are the things that we do look into when you actually manage a project. And lastly, we look into this sustainable catering. Sometimes you also have a catering of food and beverages, and we look into whether you actually get it locally, or whether you basically use some of the utensils, whether it's basically biodegradable or recyclable or whatever. So these are things that we look at when we analyze the project that you are basically submitting to us. Fourthly, we look into the economic growth. Okay, you need to also look into how to demonstrate that the project creates revenue and becomes self-sustaining. Okay, very important for us actually is to look into rising from a project, whether you can actually create some economic impact on the community. Looking into the generation of social entrepreneurship. Okay, whether you can recover from the investment, whether you can basically generate profit, and if you do generate profit, whether you basically plow back to the community. Because very important for us actually to look into rising from your project. Basically, you're also helping the community, and you also need to actually look into how sustainable is the project in order to actually have a continuous support to the community around you. And we also look into the project, can it eliminate unemployment in the local community? Because we are basically a lot of the project, when you look into the SDG, are basically looking into the community, the close-knit community. Because we, no doubt you may have a big project which basically benefit people outside Malaysia, for instance. But what interests us basically to have a small project which actually benefit your close community. Okay, so basically that's where I think now a lot of people also been enforcing that you prosper the neighbors. Okay, you basically need to actually safeguard the community around you in order for you together to grow sustainability. And lastly, we look into innovation. Okay, whether your project has innovative practices, technology, or any process. If your project is unusual, whether it's basically something that you think of, and whether it has a wow factor. So these are things which we look at in order when we do assessment of project. And with these 5 criteria or categories that we highlighted, we hope that when you design your project, you look this in mind, and you also look into how can you basically focus the project towards highlighting and profiling some of this area that we have actually highlighted. Next is when we look into the assessment criteria. Okay, we look into your entries will actually be compared also based on the guideline. In terms of the P5 standard, we also look into the guideline based on the United Nations Global Compact 10 principle. Okay, we also look into realization of the SDG 17, where you can actually have a close linkage between the P5 standard and the SDG 17, and you use PRISM method, where I mentioned the P5 impact analysis standard as your guiding tool in order for you to actually design your project, and also for you to actually look into how you want to actually pitch your project to us. Okay, and all this assessment actually will be assessed by a certified GPMB in Malaysia. So we have actually a pool of certified green project manager in Malaysia who are certified by GPM US, and our impact, our assessment basically is comparable with those actually overseas. Yeah. And how do you want to actually participate? I think very important that after knowing that we have interruption, is it? Okay. After knowing that what and how to basically participate or how to score in terms of presenting your project, we also need to look into how can you actually participate effectively for the award. So basically on the application criteria, okay, there's a presentation by individual or group having the product. So you need to actually have in mind that your project need to actually have impact to social, environment, and economic activities. Okay, where the project need to show support, also have relationship with the United Nations 17 SDG. Okay, and then your project can basically be in the conceptual phase. Basically, the project is on the design phase, or still on the table, work table. Okay, and the project can also be in progress. Currently, it's ongoing, or your project can also be already completed. Okay, so this is where you can actually showcase your project. It can actually be in the design phase, or it can be in the completed phase. And when you design your project, especially when you're in the conceptual phase, you can actually know that what are the impact that you have on social, environmental, and economic. You can actually start to design that. However, if your project is already in a completed phase, you can actually highlight to us what are the project activity which actually have this impact on the social, environmental, as well as economic activities. And in terms of the presentation format, okay, we're also looking into pitching face-to-face or via Zoom, okay, to panel of judges. Okay, that's where we are basically you need to actually pitch to the assessor. Okay, and as I mentioned, all the assessor basically is GPM certified, and you also actually can do a video presentation with watchtower or personal presentation, where you can basically pass us the video for us to view, and then we will basically do the assessment on that. Okay, one thing we like to actually highlight to you, we also have our patron. Okay, Yang Mulia Raja Muda of Selangor. Okay, we had a conversation with him about a month ago, and he is very keen to actually be present, to actually witness some of the face-to-face presentation of the project, especially from school. It can be POLYCC, okay, and he is very keen because he's also a sustainable man. Okay, he actually focused on sustainability, and he's basically very interested in that. And some of the good project, okay, from any of the POLYCC, we can actually then take on board. Actually, maybe we may actually invite Yang Mulia Raja Muda of Selangor to actually visit the Politeknik or even the college community for the actual project leader to make presentation on site. So that's where part of our plan, and we hope that we can have a good project and effective, and meaningful, and impactful project from POLYCC for us to showcase not only within Malaysia, okay, to our patron, but also we are actually going to showcase internationally. Okay, and also some of the projects which been presented in the past, we also look at it can also be duplicable. That not only that you can actually do it probably in one polytechnic or college community within your area, but it can also be applicable to other places. And SustNET having our network overseas in Indonesia, in Africa, in Singapore, and in many parts of the world, we can also showcase your project overseas, and probably we look into how can this project be implemented in overseas as well. Okay, with that, I wish all interested participants all the best, and thank you very much. And I'm open to questions if you have any. Do I make the time? I think yes, I made within 20 minutes. Any question? So I pass back to the